You know how it goes, right? You build a new Vue composable, it's clean, it's beautiful, but then a few new features later, it's an absolute mess. Well, today we're going to dive into 13 essential patterns that will take your composables from just working to being truly professional, clean, and a breeze to maintain. Does this look a little too familiar? You start with something so simple, and then boom, you're staring at this tangled web of logic, total spaghetti code that's a nightmare to figure out, let alone change. But hey, the good news is it's a super common growing pain, and it's totally fixable. And yeah, that spaghetti code causes some serious headaches. Your composables become practically impossible to test, a real chore to maintain, and the logic gets so locked in that adding even a small feature feels like a huge ordeal, and of course, it's just a breeding ground for bugs. But don't worry, there are some really solid patterns to get us out of this mess. Okay, first things first, let's talk about state. This is all about how we manage and share data across our app without, causing total chaos. And the secret weapon here is the data store pattern. Just think of it like creating a tiny, dedicated hub for a specific piece of state, like user info. Any component, anywhere, that needs that data can just plug right into this one single source of truth. So why do we even need this? Well, it saves us from this massive headache called prop drilling. That's when you have to pass data down and down and down through layers of components, even when the ones in the middle don't even care about the data. It's super inefficient and just clutters up your code. And check this out. This shows the fix perfectly. Before, you're stuck manually passing props down and bubbling events back up. But afterwards, any component, no matter how deeply nested it is, can just import use user store and get direct access. It is so much cleaner. Okay, so now everyone can read the states, which is great, but what happens when they want to change it? Because if any component can just reach in and change the state willy-nilly, you're going to lose track of what's happening really fast. And that's a recipe for disaster. And this is where you take back control. Look at the before, it's a free-for-all. Anyone can mutate that state. But the after approach is way smarter. You expose the state as read-only, so components can't just mess with it directly. Instead, you give them specific actions, like toggle dark mode function. This is huge. You're defining how the state can change, not just letting things change it whenever they want. All right, we've sorted out how we share state between our composables. So for our second section, let's look at how to keep the inside of our composables just as clean. It's all about structuring that logic. The big idea here is what's called the thin composables pattern. Basically, think of your composable as just a thin wrapper or a translator. Its only job is to connect your real business logic to Vue's reactivity system. All the heavy, complex calculations, they happen somewhere else. And this just nails the concept. See, on the left, all the math is trapped inside the Vue composable. You can't test it without firing up Vue. But on the right, you've pulled that logic out into a simple, pure JavaScript function. Now you can test that little function all by itself. No Vue required. This is an absolute game changer for writing testable code. And this idea of separating things out applies in other ways too. You can use inline composables to break down a giant, messy component into smaller logical functions right inside the file. Or you can use hidden composables to split up completely different user experiences, say one for admins and one for guests, into their own separate files. It's so powerful, you can even use these patterns to safely migrate old Options API components over one piece at a time. All right, on to part 3. Let's talk about designing the actual API for your composable. Its arguments and what it returns. The goal here is to make your functions not just easy to use, but actually hard to misuse. Oh man, we have all been here. You're looking at a line of code, and it's just this long string of random values. True, 10, 500, false. What in the world does any of this mean? Right? You can't? What's the true for? What is 10 supposed to be? You have absolutely no clue without stopping what you're doing and digging through the documentation every single time. It's a classic sign of a confusing API. And here is the beautiful solution, the options object pattern. Instead of that long, confusing list of arguments, you just pass in a single object. And just like that, the function call becomes self-documenting. You can see exactly what's going on. Deep is true, capacity is 10, it's crystal clear. Now here's a super important pro tip for this pattern. Inside your composable, always provide default values for that options object. That way, if someone forgets to pass an option in, your code doesn't just blow up. It makes your functions way more robust and forgiving. Okay, let's check out another pattern for flexibility. This one's all about making your composable smart enough to handle whatever you throw at it, whether that's a reactive ref or just a plain old static value. It should just work, no questions asked. The old way was to litter your code with all these isRef checks, right? But now Vue gives us this amazing utility called toValue. You just use it on your input, and it does the work for you. If it's a ref, it unwraps it. If it's not, it just returns the value. One simple line, no more annoying if statements. So much cleaner.
And this idea isn't just for inputs. You can do the same for your outputs. Sometimes a user just needs a simple reactive value back from your composable, but other times they might need a whole object with extra controls and methods. The dynamic return pattern lets you serve both use cases, which makes your composable way more versatile.
So, after putting all of this into practice, better state, cleaner logic, and flexible functions, what's the big payoff? What does this actually get us? Well, what you end up with is code that's just a joy to work on. Your composables are finally easy to test, they're simple to understand and maintain, and they're flexible enough that you can reuse them all over your application. This right here is what professional-grade code looks and feels like. And really, the goal here isn't to just memorize a bunch of rules. It's about building an intuition, a mental framework for how to design clean, scalable solutions in Vue. It's a new way of thinking. So, I'll leave you with this one question to think about. Looking at your own code, which one of these patterns really jumped out at you? Which one are you going to try first to start cleaning things up? Go for it. Thanks for tuning in.